Hey everyone, I'm Lauren Luz, and this talk is how to fundraise for nonprofits in crypto. So I'll start out by defining what a nonprofit is. So this is from Webster's or Cambridge Dictionary. A nonprofit is defined as an organization that is not conducted or maintained for the purpose of making a profit. Which is a really kind of like interesting and sad definition, especially if you think that nonprofits are the ones that are providing a lot of the value that we currently depend on in society. You see nonprofits that are springing up to take care of rivers and that are creating waste management systems in cities to get rid of garbage. Yet the idea of the fact that they could be making a profit is something that's shocking in current society. So how do nonprofits get their funding? Well, through donations. Currently, nonprofits depend on donations for the majority of their funding, which creates all kinds of, bad systems, especially in the Web 2 space. Nonprofits end up having to kind of work towards appealing to their donors, and they kind of still end up with these top-down hierarchical structures where they're just trying to do what the donors need them to do, and they also depend on the sacrifice of their communities to support them. They depend on sacrifice of volunteers to be doing the actual work, and they depend on the sacrifice of donors to be creating the funding stream so that they can add this value to society that we very, very currently need. So basically, this whole talk is kind of me trying to convince you, but probably you guys are already all convinced, why nonprofits should get into the crypto space and start doing their fundraising in crypto and start learning what we are building here. So why crypto? If you talk to mostly nonprofit audiences, the reasons why crypto or blockchain mostly pertain to transparency or peer-to-peer transactions or things that are borderless or global. But in my opinion, the why crypto for nonprofits starts with reaching new audiences. And not only reaching new people, you're reaching, I think, $1.4 trillion, which is currently in the crypto space, which is currently in crypto. So you're reaching new audiences, new funding, but the awesome thing about those new audiences is that they're also value aligned. There's a huge Web3 for good, Web3 for public goods movement that I think a lot of us are part of here in this space. There are people who are working to see how we can better fund open source software, how we can better fund crypto public goods, and we're creating all this infrastructure to create better funding mechanisms to support public goods projects like nonprofits. And so the end result of that is that there's all kinds of innovation. There's a lot of tech that's being used and developed and created and layered on top of regular donation systems. You still see donations, but you see a lot of layers on top of that make donations better. And finally, I think what we're moving towards ultimately is moving away from donations as the mechanism for funding nonprofits and moving into economic models as a way that could fund nonprofits. So more on that later, but we'll start with donation innovation. And you guys all probably already know about this. I think this is a mostly really Web3 familiar audience, but I'll talk a little bit about quadratic funding as an innovative donation mechanism that's really made popular in Web3. With quadratic funding, you've got matching partners that donate to a matching pool that gets distributed to projects according to how individual donors vote. But the main important thing here is that the number of contributions matters more than the amount contributed. So it's basically a democratic distribution of the matching pool where the funds go to the projects that are most popular by the community. So in this way, you see both large and small donors creating an impact. Large donors can trust that their funds are going to projects that matter to people, and small donors can trust that their donations are going to be matched and then therefore amplified. So many of you probably know a lot about quadratic funding, but if you don't, Gitcoin created this great website, WTF. WTF is QF.com, and it explains how QF works, and it has a great mapping of you can put numbers in and see actually what the matching funds would be for certain projects. And also just major shout out to Gitcoin, who really took the idea of quadratic funding and made it a thing. They've raised, I think Azim was saying, over $56 million for public goods projects in quadratic funding. So major praise for Gitcoin for really taking quadratic funding and making it something that we all use and depend on in the Web3 space. And so I'm going to so there's quadratic funding. This is innovation that's happening in the donation space. And then there's also other cool innovative things that are happening on top of donations in the space as well. So I'll talk about some things we have at Giveth. We're kind of layering this also on top of other stuff we're doing on the platform like quadratic funding. We've got one thing called givebacks, which is donor rewards. Basically with givebacks, when someone donates to a public goods project, they get rewarded with Give tokens. So 100% of the funds go to the project and the donor actually gets rewarded. So this is kind of like a really interesting thing that's only made possible in crypto. We created the Give token, we issued the Give token, we decided that we wanted to incentivize this behavior of supporting public goods projects. And the cool thing about givebacks is that it allows us to do things like referral programs that are kind of layered on top of givebacks. With most referral programs, you can refer people to donate through your link, and then you get a percentage of funds that either come from the project or from the platform. But because we have givebacks, we actually take the funds that go to the refer through from givebacks. So imagine your project, and you're raising funds for your own project. You can share your project via a referral link, and then people donate through your referral link. You get 100% of the donations, plus part of the give back. So you can actually get more than 100% of the donations that are being given to you for your project. And then we've got cool stuff like Give Power on top of that. So once you get these Give tokens, you can use them to stake on projects and basically boost them so that they're seen first on the project's page. So this becomes really popular, really important, I think, in quadratic funding rounds when there's like a lot of competition, like you want your project to be seen first. You can actually kind of control how projects are being shown up on the page by using your Give tokens to stake. So these are things that we're layering on top of Giveth that we've been experimenting with, that we've been building to try to make donations better for projects as well. But there's more. I forgot I had the slide here as well. Actually, there is a lot more innovation happening in the donation space as well. And I wanted to give a shout out to some awesome projects that are doing great work that I think that people should check out. Octant is leveraging proof of stake, basically using e-staking rewards to fund public goods projects. Then we've got Domino Fund that's using dominance assurance contracts, which is kind of like a donation game where there's this opportunity to sort of make profit while you're donating. It's extremely cool, and you should check it out. And then Prop House, which is kind of which is using basically public goods funding via vote. It's kind of like allocating funding via token vote. So these are other opportunities that nonprofits could take advantage of by moving into the donation space of Web3. But as I was saying, the next thing I really want to focus on is creating economic models for nonprofits, and why I think this is kind of really the light at the end of the tunnel for public goods funding in Web3. So what does this look like? A crypto or a nonprofit project of any kind, their job is to produce public goods. But they can also then issue a digital token, and this is kind of the easy part. Anybody can launch a token, but your token doesn't really mean anything unless there's demand for that token. So it's creating a digital token and then ensuring that there's demand for the token, that people actually want the token. And then what comes out of that is that you can issue digital tokens to the people that are adding value to your project or adding value to your ecosystem. And then while ensuring demand for those tokens, you kind of have the other side of the market emerging. People want those tokens. They want to buy those tokens. So you end up with a market. You've got people creating value, can sell tokens into the market. People want those tokens because they care about the value being added, and they buy those tokens. And then this creates also the opportunity for speculators to come in the mix, buying and selling the tokens. And then there's this whole ecosystem, this whole economy that kind of emerges, buying and selling and trading around essentially a project that's creating a public good. So the project can actually benefit from the profit models that are created by having an economic model and use that to kind of bootstrap the value that they're adding to society and produce things that are free for end users. So I'll go into an example of this, and I think the best, or one of the best things I can think of in a Web3 space that's currently really successful is RetroPGF, using an economic model like this. RetroPGF, optimism, retroactive public goods funding. It's based on the idea that it makes sense to reward value that was already created instead of kind of thinking about what's going to be useful and give it money and hope it works out. So that's kind of like the initial kind of concept of funding things retroactively, but how can this possibly work? So the way that it works in the initial stages is that Optimism created the token OP, and then they allocated a percentage of the entire OP supply to retroactive public goods funding rewards that are basically going to builders when they add value to the Optimism ecosystem. So this is kind of like how it starts. It incentivizes people to add free value to Optimism and to work to contribute to the Optimism ecosystem because they're going to get paid for doing that. And this is kind of where we're at now. And then this is kind of like where it's going to be going. And this isn't like kind of being said very, very explicitly, but being implied a lot. Basically, the idea is that builders are adding value to Optimism, which then leads to demand for OP block space. It's like, and then demand for OP block space means that the sequencer generates revenue. This is like if you're using the Optimism network, then the transaction fees and MEV leads to ETH revenue. And then this isn't happening yet, but that ETH revenue could be used to buy OP tokens and then be used to reward people via retro PGF. So not only is it kind of like there's this ecosystem where there's demand for optimism, there's also people that are incentivized to add value that's free to the Optimism network at the same time as there's this economy being built around this token that's creating value for the token, that's making the token price go up and ultimately leading to more profit for the Optimism ecosystem. So this is working, or I think this is like a really interesting model. And then that kind of leads to the opportunity where now, how do those projects that want to add value to the Optimism ecosystem first get funding? Well, they can get funding from investors. Investors can fund projects that are adding value to the Optimism ecosystem because they know that projects are likely to get funding from retro PGF. And the investors, they can, create some systems where investors and builders then are getting rewarded for value being added to Optimism. And so this ends up to this like whole cycle of innovation. There's an economy around adding value to the Optimism ecosystem. It's ultimately a public good that anybody can use. And a lot of things that are being created are public goods. So it's kind of like, wow, there's no donations in here. There's investment strategy, there's economic models, and there's an opportunity for projects who are actually just creating services that we all need or that we all want in a way that benefits and creates profit. So we're running a Twitter platform. We have a community with General Magic and Giveth called @RetroPGF on X. So if you want to learn more about RetroPGF, you can kind of follow our Twitter. But just a kind of example as to why this works so well, Optimism currently is giving out $50 million of OP tokens to projects who via retroactive public goods funding. This is happening right now where badge holders, I think it started November 8th, the voting. Badge holders are voting on how to allocate $50 million, which came from this economic model. So the talk was called How to Fundraise for Nonprofits in Crypto, but I think it really should be called How and Why to Fundraise in Crypto for Your Awesome Project, and do away with this idea that you need to be a nonprofit and not profiting at all in order to add value that's free to your communities. So, support our mission. My name is Lauren. I'm from Giveth, and that's a link tree. It has like donation links and links to all of our socials, and you can also talk to anybody at like Giveth Swag if you want to learn more about this, about the stuff that we're doing, and thank you so much.